Bonjour tout le monde, bienvenue, I'm Diane, this is We in France, and today we're talking about assumptions. Now, a lot of the times they can be pretty harmless, even if they're majorly off base, but I want to get into one specifically that people have assumed about me and other expats over the years about moving abroad, what life is like, and I just want to set the record straight, so let's get into it. Number one, that you'll automatically become fluent in another language, or that I speak French perfectly like a native. Any way you slice it, learning another language is a lot of work and does not just happen by osmosis. It doesn't happen by chance. I wish that it did. But fluency and becoming fluent, it's an ongoing process. It's just not something that happens solely by being in another country and just absorbing what's happening around you. Just living in another country doesn't guarantee you any sort of fluency. It's certainly not going to teach you grammar and all the technical stuff that goes into learning a language. Just living in France can only get you so far when it comes to learning French. Sure, you could get to a conversational level, no problem, just hearing things and picking up little pieces. But beyond that, to get to any type of higher level, you're going to need to practice and learn some more, and it goes on and on and on. And that goes double if you're starting from zero without any base in the language. Language learning is a never-ending process. You definitely don't arrive with basic language skills and then all of a sudden wake up a year later and speak flawlessly. You have to work at it, and I can't stress that enough. I'll always be learning French. I learn something new every single day, English too, most of the time, and I'll always have an accent in French. It's cool. I started learning in my 20s. I'm okay with that. Mistakes are normal, and being perfect is not my goal, and I think feeling like a fish out of water is normal. It's part of life. About my French skills, I speak French just fine. Everyone understands me, but I don't know every tense, every conjugation, every expression under the sun. Far from it. My motivation, truthfully, it comes and it goes, but I'm good enough, and that works for me. That's the truth. All right, number two, that I don't work. I've always worked since moving to France. I worked in sales and project management, as well as publishing for a little while, and YouTube never was and is not my full-time job. What I earn in ad revenue here, it's not reliable, and most of the money I earn from this channel, it goes towards paying operating and equipment costs and all the things I need to keep this little dog and pony show going. It doesn't really net me much at the end of the day, especially after I pay taxes. People I meet locally back when Dagny was alive and we'd walk in the park, they'd assume that I didn't work because, they've told me as much. I set my own hours. People that I work with are in other time zones. So people locally, when they see me running errands, between the hours of 9 to 5, when most people with an office job are in the office, they assume that I don't work. And of course, there's no one way to go about living abroad. I talk about that a lot. There's no one way to go about blogging or making videos or working. Everyone's personal lives are different. Everyone's financial situations are different. Some people don't have the need or desire to work, and that's cool too. But for me, the assumption that I don't work is probably one of the biggest ones that I've heard. And beyond the work aspect, We in France provides a purpose for me, and that's important. All right, number three, that I do French things all the time, like go to the market daily, have 5-course dinners, and all that. First, not all French people shop exclusively at the farmer's market, especially not all the time, or eat 5-course meals made from scratch every night, and buy cheese from the fromager, and all those typical French things, right? The media portrays French people as kind of being this uniform group of people, but they're actually quite diverse. And stereotypical French things, they don't apply to everyone across the board. I buy a fresh baguette maybe a few times a month. I do the majority of my grocery shopping at a supermarket. Just don't want to wait in line all day at the farmer's market. But I do go a few times a month. That's just me. And I enjoy all the wonderful aspects of French culture, especially food culture. But I'm not living life like someone in a movie, in my everyday life. And again, I always feel weird kind of having to mention I don't live some fairy tale life, but I get emails from people every single month from people romanticizing life in France, and that's just not real life. Vacations are magical. Yes, I love going on vacation in France, but regular life in France is just regular life with tasty perks, interesting stories and experiences, and major positives that I'll be forever grateful for. But let's not confuse real life with vacation. All right, number 4, that we're automatically a citizen in our new home. The process is not automatic, and I'm actually not a French citizen. So I think people sometimes confuse citizen with permanent resident, or think that you need to be a citizen to live and work legally here in France, or that it's even everyone's goal. And I know a lot of people think that if you move to France or you marry a French person, that you automatically become a citizen, but that's not the case. Citizenship is a process that you apply for, just like it is in the US. It's not automatic. I'm actually not looking to become a citizen anytime soon. I have no plans of starting the paperwork. I'm a permanent resident here. I have like the equivalent of a US green card that allows me to live and work and pay taxes here. I'm sure that at some point in the future, I will apply for citizenship, and that became an option to me after several years of marriage. I became eligible, but it is a substantial expense. It is a bit of paperwork. It does take a little while. So again, not a priority right now. French citizenship would actually change nothing about my day-to-day life, so I'm just not rushing to get into it. I'd get a French passport, which is kind of cool, but I already have the right to live and work here since I'm married to Tom, a French citizen. So that French citizenship option, it doesn't have an expiration date. It'll be there for me in the future, and I'll do it one day, just not rushing into it right now. The French bureaucracy, it's just not something I'm looking to tackle at the moment anyway. All right, number 5, that we are double taxed, and it is really complicated. Let me preface this with a disclaimer that says I am not a tax professional, so always do your own research based on your particular situation. But that aside, let me explain. As a US citizen who is also a French resident, I am required to file taxes with the IRS every year, but that doesn't mean I automatically owe anything to the US, and that's because there are tax treaties that prevent double taxation. So I declare my global income both here in France and in the US, and then there's something called the foreign earned income exclusion, which basically exempts you from paying US taxes up to a certain amount. For tax year 2024, I believe it's $126,500. So if you earn less than the equivalent of $126,500, that income gets excluded, and you're only paying the taxes in France. So because I make less than $126,500, my tax burden to the US is 0. That's again because I pay taxes in France as a tax resident here. So my personal situation is actually pretty straightforward. I have a very easy tax return. Tom is not a US resident or citizen, and I actually do my taxes myself just as a married person filing as a single. I actually use a service, not sponsored, down below. I'll link a promo code if you want to use that service as well. It's all online, super simple and affordable. Next, that life's an adventure all the time, like what you see on Instagram. And I always say there's a huge difference between living and working in France permanently and then someone coming to France for an extended vacation for a set period of time and maybe retiring here. You know, people think living abroad is a constant adventure where you're gallivanting off to far off lands and doing all these amazing things and taking advantage of everything the country has to offer every single minute of every single day. And, you know, maybe that's the case for people who come with the intention of traveling nonstop, or people looking for that vacation kind of experience who don't work or, you know, have a very kind of nomadic lifestyle. But there are people like me just living a normal existence, albeit in a different language and a different culture. Unless I'm on vacation, my day-to-day life is probably a lot like yours. I wake up, I would walk the dog before she passed away. I would work, I would grocery shop, I'd work out, clean, do all the other mundane tasks that life requires. And sometimes, yes, life is an adventure when I make it one. What comes to mind is a family vacation back with my parents, my brother, his wife, all that in Corsica back like almost a decade ago now. I think that was one of the best vacations of my life. But generally speaking, my everyday life is pretty ordinary. And yeah, people are speaking French around me and not English. And yeah, there are loads of cultural differences. And yeah, we have great bread and cheese and wine. But the novelty of all of that, it wears off like life anywhere, and it becomes regular life. My day is probably more like yours than you'd think. Regular life becomes regular life anywhere. Of course, I try to enjoy my life and go on vacation and see the country and do fun things. But I balance that with seeing my friends and family back in the US. But you know, I also work, I pay my mortgage, I grocery shop, I do all those other mundane things I already mentioned that you do wherever you live. And I say it a lot, there's this misconception that all of life's problems disappear just because you live in France, or that things are all amazing all the time because you live abroad. And that's just not real life. All right, number 7, that I must be rich, or that I married rich if I was able to move to France. And let me just dispel that one right here. No trust fund. I admit that when I moved to France, I had several months worth of my salary from my job back in New York City saved up, just so I'd be able to have that cushion and cover expenses as I got settled. But I'm not wealthy by any means. I live in a very normal house, drive a very normal car. I don't think you need to have a ton of cash to move to France, but there's so many factors that it'll depend on, and also your visa requirements and just so many things about how you live life and what you're looking for. Now, that said, a few things did work in my favor when I moved here, and I don't want to gloss over them and make it seem so simple because it's not simple, but these things worked for me. One, I moved alone. I didn't have a big family coming with me. It was just me. I didn't have typical moving expenses like paying for a container ship and shipping furniture because I told you in a recent video, I came with 2 suitcases. That's all I needed. It was my choice to pack light, to save money, get what I needed once I got here. And 2, I moved into a converted backyard shed. Yes, like a tool shed that was converted for 350 euros a month. Yeah, there was heat in the bathroom and all that. But I got that squared away through friends of friends before I moved. So I didn't have like expensive hotel or Airbnb expenses for a month while I was looking for a place. I had one. 3, as the spouse of a French citizen, I had the right to work from day one. So yeah. And a big one, 4, I moved here in my 20s. I didn't have a home, no mortgage, didn't have kids, still don't. Nothing really tying me down. So I felt freer than maybe someone in a different stage of life. And I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm just letting you know, breaking the assumption that I'm some kind of like trust fund kid or something like that. No, that's just my situation. And I'll also say France isn't a super cheap place to live overall, but certain aspects of life here are definitely more affordable, and it depends what you want to spend money on. For example, healthcare costs, that's a big one. They're much more manageable here in France. No one's going to get bankrupted over medical procedures. Same with university tuition, and also cheap wine and cheese. Bottom line, I'd say you can live better in France with less. Next, that I didn't like living in the USA, or that I'd never move back. Okay, so I'm American. I feel American, but my life is in France now. So it's kind of a split. And I always enjoy myself when I go back and visit the US, as does Tom. And I'm pretty fortunate to be able to go back for the holidays most of the time. I love my country, not so much the current administration. I love my friends. I love my family. And the US is always going to be my first home, and I'll never shut the door on moving back there. We never know where life's going to take us, but I have no plans to do so. I'm not in France because I hate the US. It wasn't a political decision. I'm in France simply because I married a French guy, because I wanted the challenge and the new experience, especially the first time I moved, before Tom was in the picture. And quite simply, it was easier for me to move here after we got married than for Tom to move to the US. And then things just unfolded and changed, and I stayed. And here we are over a decade later. So far, so good. And on top of that, the word never, it just sounds so permanent. France is home. It's been home for 10 years. I have no idea what the future holds, but again, I love visiting the US. I visit as often as I can, especially for Thanksgiving. I love that. So with that, let me know down below in the comments if you have any assumptions that you've either made about people who live abroad, or maybe ones that you've heard directed at you about your life abroad. And yeah, anything else you want to say on the topic, I'd love to hear about it down below. But let me leave it here for today. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you back on We in France soon. Salut!